Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me a little bit early today. It's Naval Academy Commissioning Week here, and traffic and everything is heinous, so I have to get a good start, an early start to my day. Welcome, everyone, to the PT on Ice Daily Show, brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to today's Jerry on Ice. I am Alex Germano, a TA within the modern management of the older adult division in the online and live settings, and that's with lead faculty Dustin Jones and Christina Previtt. Modern management of the older adult live is coming to only Maryland June 5th and 6th. I'll be there with Dustin. And then we're headed to Arizona in June as well, June 19th and 20th. You can catch that information on ptonice.com to find out more about the live courses. But just another heads up that the next online cohort starts June 23rd. Those have been selling out rapidly. So if you want a spot, you can check out the website to find out more and sign up. You know it's going to get real today because I have both an AirPod in and a microphone, a lapel microphone, and I hope it's working. Alan will check in with me later about that. Just a little background on today's topic. I just got done with the Clinical Management of the Fitness Athlete, CMFA, Essential Foundations course online with Alan, Mitch, and Gmo. I have a background in CrossFit and coaching and wanted to get more information on how to bridge the CrossFit world and the PT world together. And it ended up being a great course to really refine my eye on human movement, learn some new skills, and get my own technique critiqued and improve as an athlete and clinician. I got smashed a lot in this course for the way that I squat, and I thought I squatted really well. Turns out I look great as I squat. I go down really well. My chest stays very vertical. But as I come up out of the squat, I really start to initiate with my hips going high in the air. I'm trying to describe this as well as I can for the podcast listener, so I hope it makes sense. I go down beautifully, my chest is vertical. As I start to initiate out of the bottom of the squat, my hips rise very quickly. I kind of lean over and use my posterior chain to get the weight up. In the CMFA world, this is called a good morning fault. I essentially am doing a good morning, or like the type of exercise, to ascend out of the bottom of my squat. I'll demo for a quick sec here. This might be an awful spot to demo. I would go down. As I come up, my butt rises, and then I hinge over, okay? So that's what my squat kind of looks like when I get heavy. So this is an indication that I prefer to use my posterior chain or have weakness in my quads, and that I'm unable to maintain that vertical chest upon standing. So could be a motor control problem, which it likely is, in addition to my hamstrings and posterior chain are much stronger than my quads, so they kind of like to take over in the squat. Now this got me thinking about how my patients sit to stand. I think I've always been just okay when someone's able to sit to stand without the use of their hands. And if they can do it, I've been like, great, good, check the box. But I started to dig in deeper to their technique. I've been seeing a ton of arthritis and low back pain lately. And the one thing, and the one thing a lot of these folks have in common is they display a very hip dominant or good morning style transfer. You could say that they do like this good morning to get out of the chair. Let me demonstrate. Ooh, chair wasn't as close as I thought. So, as they stand up, they launch themselves forward, shoot the hips up high, and then stand up tall. So again, just a little bit better view for Instagram here. Shoot the chest forward, hips really rise, and then they stand up tall. Oop, hold on one second. My TV turned on. Sorry, y'all. Okay, so now that you understand that type of transfer, so they really adopt this, what looks like a nose over toes type method to stand. And I've started to realize that like tons of my patients are doing this, even the ones without pain. maybe just the people who are really weak. This is the way that they're getting up and out of chairs. So what the heck is going on? It makes me think maybe this is just years of therapists telling them to go nose over toes, causing them to use this compensatory strategy to get out of the chair, or that is just continuing through people's life, or is there pain on board and that people start avoiding using the quads in general to rise from a chair, and they found it just much easier to chuck their body forward out of a chair with this huge rocking momentum, and over time that has continued to persist. Now, after years and years of doing it this way, to avoid the initial pain that they had, they now just like have weak quads and can't stand out of a chair normally. And I know this feels like a super contentious topic for me, and let me tell you right now, I use the cue nose over toes all the time. I've been using it all the time, but I'm really starting to consider when I use it and why I use it. And it's contentious because I know Jerry PTs are just all about it. Like that's how we're getting people up out of chairs. In acute care, that is how you're getting people out of bed and out of those big chairs in their room. And it is a great compensation to get out of a chair if they don't have the strength to do it themselves. It is an amazing cue to build the bike with somebody and give them confidence in being able to stand up without their hands. But I'm going to argue and play devil's advocate that a good morning style transfer is actually a movement fault that can continue to limit some of our patients rather than an acceptable movement pattern that we should settle for. I'm thinking that the good morning transfer, I'm doing a Dustin, repeating myself, good morning transfer is a movement fault that can limit people rather than an acceptable movement pattern. We should not settle for the good morning transfer. If someone was 25 years old and came to your clinic and every squat looked like my good morning squat, that awful hip rise first out of the bottom, wouldn't we as PTs jump in to fix it? We would be like, oh, heck no. Of course that you have low back pain while you squat when you're doing this. So why is it okay that we settle for 85-year-old Nancy with back pain to be doing this type of transfer, knowing that this type of transfer can increase loading on the low back? Why do we settle for Joan with knee pain, always transferring this way and allowing her quads to get weaker and weaker and her pain to worsen and her functional decline to worsen, right? Bear with me. When you and I get out of a chair, how does that look? Think about yourself as you get up to rise out of chairs today. How does that look? I argue that most of us probably just stand up, right? It probably does not look like this. Heave ho, and then launch myself out of a chair, right? Most of the time we lean a little bit forward and then we push up with our legs, okay? Think about what a normal transfer would look like. I don't really think about bringing my nose all the way over my toes. So when and why is this changing with our patients? Why all of a sudden are people really chucking their body forward? Should we accept that it's just age and at that, magical age of 65 that we just should start transferring that way? Well, I think it's abnormal and it indicates to us an ineffective movement pattern, and our patients are likely underutilizing an entire muscle group. So research, because someone's going to come at me and be like, Alex, none of this is normal. Don't worry about it. Older adults demonstrate higher EMG activities throughout their lower extremity musculature during a sit-to-stand transfer as compared to younger adults. That's pretty normal. We see that a lot in stair climbing, transfers, descending stairs, etc. Their muscular demand is greater. And so that's why I am passionate about fixing this transfer style, because older adults are probably underutilizing an entire muscle group made to do this thing, getting out of a chair. There was a really interesting article published in the Journal of Biomechanics in 2021. That's how you know, I've gotten deep in this because I've read the Journal of Biomechanics. I'm going to link this article on Facebook, okay? Facebook. And it has amazing graphics in it. And it shows a graphic of 4 stages of a transfer. I think it's important to understand those four stages. In a normal transfer, there is a shift forward, momentum shift. There's a momentum transfer into the feet. There's an extension phase and then a stabilization phase. So yes, forward momentum is normal and necessary to get out of a chair. But what could be deemed abnormal, or that compensatory strategy, is that exaggerated trunk flexion. variation. So if you look in the diagrams, they have like some compensatory strategies. The trunk flexion exaggeration is one. Look at those graphics in the article because they're really great. So I think somebody with a hip dominant transfer, I think the hip dominant transfer could in fact be used as a tool to modify around pain, build the bike with somebody, get them, independent in transfers outside of therapy. But again, this article notes that it's really just like a compensatory strategy to get out of a chair. The other graphic in this article talks about age-related muscular compensation in the sit to stand, and it notes that the quads in a healthy adult, not older adult, but a healthy adult, have the highest muscle forces, but in an aged adult have lower muscle force, and that the hamstrings have a higher activation and earlier onset, especially in the knee OA patient, or the patient with knee OA. Sorry, Christina. And so that's something to consider. So now we see as people are getting older, quads are less active, hamstrings are more active and initiating earlier, which makes sense why we're seeing that huge forward trunk lean. And I think it's fascinating. So the muscular theory kind of holds up about why this is happening. We have patients getting weaker in the front of the leg, stronger in the back. There's an imbalance. But I think masters athletes continue to prove us that we don't need to settle for some of these muscular and normal age-related declines. And I think a little bit of this is just deconditioning, because I meet plenty of folks who are 90 plus that can sit and stand perfectly normal out of a chair without the use of their hands. Okay, so now somebody is screaming into the podcast, into their car and going, Alex, it's the ankles. It's not their muscles, it's their ankles. And you're right. Ankle dorsiflexion limitations can be a cause of the fault. What's really happening is that the patient is unable to translate their tibia forward on their foot, and they're keeping their tibia very vertical during the transfer because they literally can't get their knee any further forward because of a restriction at their ankle. I agree. So now that we understand the whys behind this transfer, let's talk about what to do about it. Because like I said, we're not settling for good morning fault style hip dominant transfers, okay? Nose over toes, like I said, is an incredible cue to build the bike with somebody, compensate for pain in an acute way, right? Not chronic. So it's not the way that they should be transferring forever. So please don't let them transfer like that forever. Or improve someone's confidence or independence in their life in ADLs. It is a beautiful, I think the nose over toes cue changed lives. It's probably changed people's lives. And it has gotten people up out of chairs after having significant medical events. It eases the therapist assist levels to get them out of chairs. But again, it's a compensatory strategy, and that's fine. I totally accept that there are patients out there that will need to compensate for the rest of their lives with this movement strategy. If that's the only way they can get it done, I am all for it. Sign me up. But if this is something, if this is a movement that you might have room to address with folks, I say get on it. I love to start patients with higher surfaces. So working on keeping the trunk nice and vertical just from a much higher surface. So they don't have to do that huge forward momentum to get out of the chair. And I work on eccentric lowerings while retraining this pattern. So for example, I will have someone stand, keep their hands out in front of them, and try to sit down, keeping their chest up nice and tall. So instead of telling them to sit their hips back, which again could start to train that nose over toes patterning, I will say sit straight down, much like the CMFA crew uses in their squats, right? We want you to sit straight down. So we can get a little bit of eccentric quad loading with that type of transfer. I also think just telling someone to bend their knees is really beneficial. A lot of folks don't love to bend their knees, and they've avoided it for a really, really long time. Now, if the ankle is the limiting factor, because that person who's still screaming at me because I have not addressed the ankle, just toss their heels up on 5-pound change plates. In the home, I use books. I'll try to find books to use, or the edge of an Airex pad, or I feel like, or sometimes my discs, I'll stack up and use that as a slight heel lift, or you can get them in a shoe with a bigger heel. But think about elevating the heels to help train this new movement pattern. I understand when you leave They are not going to have their heels elevated all the time to work on this. And that's okay, right? We're just trying to do our job as the PT to get their quads working more and get them into a more quad dominant squat. So like you almost want them to be doing like a cyclist squat variation with those heels elevated. But if you give them slight elevation, you can kind of get away from some of that ankle restriction. Or you can do like an awesome remom and do some great ankle mobility before trying to go into the sit to stands and maybe use that as your test retest. Then with these patients, I'm hitting tons of single leg quad work. I'm doing as much single leg as I can. We can achieve higher EMG activity of quad if we skew the feet. So putting one foot ahead of the other while transferring. I will just work on that a lot. I will elevate one foot up on foam so that the foot that's not elevated on foam has to work harder. I can work on step ups and lunges and deep squatting. Please do not stop just at chair height. There is so much beyond the chair that we can do in a squatting pattern to be able to strengthen someone's quads. And I just keep trying to reinforce and rework this sit to stand technique whenever I can. This topic has shaken up my world. I am revitalized in my attitudes towards the sit to stand transfer in general. And I hope I've inspired you to just look at that transfer more instead of for just completion, but for, performance. Like, is the person doing it to the best of their ability, or are we just settling because they can stand out of the chair without their arms? Thank you to the CMFA crew. I feel more motivated to treat the sit to stand in a 75-year-old patient like I treat a squat in a 25-year-old. We can optimize that movement and we can make sure our patients are brutally strong and not just settle for someone getting out of the chair without their hands. I want to hear from you. This feels contentious to me, and I hope I didn't make it that way. It's just, I've been thinking about this through a different lens. And I want to hear if this sparked something in you. Do you completely disagree with me? Do you have alternative strategies for managing this problem? I want to hear them. So drop it in the comments. Remember that article will be linked on Facebook. And let's start a discussion. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.